one of the things that I really, really have enjoyed a lot in the past a month or so on Twitter is the algorithm and how it's worked so well for me. And I don't think this was by mistake because I do put in a lot of work on Twitter, and I think a lot of people, it's basically very underrated in my opinion. I think Twitter has a better algorithm than Instagram and other social media platforms, and it's fairly factual because especially when someone like myself who has just shy of 150 odd followers on Twitter, gaining about almost 200,000 impressions in just a 28-day period. I don't think that's by mistake, unless you say something that goes viral. But for the most part, it's been pretty, steady stream. Some tweets getting, really in the algorithm here and there. And I say this because, for someone who has such a small account, it's there's definitely a lot of potential here, and there's definitely a lot of ways to spruce up your following. And I'm not saying the end goal is just to become, such a high followed page because you have to have some form of value that people look at and they go, "Oh, I actually want to follow, Joe DeVito's content and actually find some type of value or some type of, quality content to where you can follow it and go, hey, I'm actually learning something from this, or I'm actually following this because, this content entices me to just, want to." And this number is actually just really surprising to me because, for someone who has such a small amount of followers compared to other people, I go, imagine what, an account with 1,000 followers, 10,000, 100,000 could accomplish. And I don't say that just because numbers are, the most important thing. But like I said before, the content that you're putting out is extremely valuable. It's crucial. And one of the biggest things that helped me get to that level of impression volume, and it's very simple, was basically what I call quid pro quo, give and get. And what I mean by that is you have to give and get. It's like, the law of what you give, you should basically get in return in a sense, like, in equal parts. And when I first made my Twitter back in February, I was getting almost no impressions because I'm a nobody, no followers, whatnot. I said, okay, you're gonna have to follow a few people who align with, your ideas, your hobbies or your lifestyle. Then you go from there. And I think it took a matter of like 6, 7 months before I realized how you really start to branch out on social media, especially if it's Twitter. Is what you give is what you get. So I started basically commenting on everyone's post like I followed, and it sounds maybe generic, but it's probably one of the most genius ways to get into the algorithm because you're helping other people's posts be recognized by the algorithm, and then especially when people reply back to you and they compliment you, they, hey, thanks Joe, appreciate the support. Or they even like shout you out like, hey, it's a very underrated page or an underdog of a page, whatever. Then you start to see your page start to grow, and it's actually very important because the end goal is to provide some type of quality content. But to get there, you want to give that content out to a lot of people, and to do that, you need a larger following in a sense. Not to say that numbers are the most important, but if you want to throw it out there to a larger audience, you have to build it up over time. And so basically, for someone like myself who types extremely fast, I've typed a lot, my whole entire life, basically like 70 words a minute. Not that it matters, but I said, you know what, I'm really good at it. I said, how can I use that to my advantage and to basically capitalize on, more, what you call like impressions, followers. So I started doing that where I'd literally go through my followers and comment, try to type, something engaging on each and every one of their posts. And then, of course, they would respond, and then people would check out my page. And then, in a short duration of time, a lot of people just started following me. It took a while to break, 80 followers, and then 100, and then now I'm at 150 ish. And it's honestly just in such a short time frame, like how fast a page can grow like that, especially when people look at what you're putting out there and they go, you know what, I can jive, with that type of content. Like, this guy hunts, he invests, and he loves to learn. I mean, what more is there to it? That's just what I do, and it's a free speech platform for the most part. So if I have to recommend anything when it comes to the algorithm, there has to be the method of giving, basically getting in return. And if you're having trouble, basically just have to engage more with your followers, You have to engage more with the people that you're following. If you give people support, I guarantee you they will give support back to you. It's basically the law of, like, what you give is what you get. And so I'm just honestly excited, to see that my page is growing at the pace as it is, and the fact that people engage, on a decent scale. I'd love to see more engagement, more criticism, constructive criticism. But for the most part, it's very cool that I've started to break into that algorithm to where I think on a monthly basis I'd probably only see, quite literally, like maybe 1,000 to 2,000 impressions. And then in a span of less than 30 days, I see almost 200,000 impressions, with a page of 150 followers, which is literally nothing. But, it's the people that I follow that throw out that type of content that gives me that much inspiration to want to go out there and just basically, up my standards. You have to, like, step it up in order to be around these type of people. And it's just, honestly, that's how you get into the algorithm. And then, of course, you start to type things that just work their way into the algorithm. Well, the other things I've noticed too with Twitter is that, if you ask questions, you're opening engagement to your audience. One post I did not think would do fairly well was what brokerage platform do you use? Now, what I mean by this, if you're not aware of brokerage, is like stock trading, like stock market. And on the stock market, they have what we call brokerages, which are platforms that allow you to basically trade stocks or holdings on. And they are SEC approved. Security Exchange Commission. They oversee these brokerages, making sure they're complying to the legalities, and the the laws and whatnot. But mostly, all I said was, what brokerage platform do you use? Disadvantages or advantages? And almost 60 people commented on just that one post. Now keep in mind, 150 followers, right? I would expect maybe one or two comments. Impressions on this post was 11,000. All I asked was, what brokerage platform do you use, and are there disadvantages and advantages? And I got that much engagement, 3 retweets, 32 likes. Why? Most of the people who like this don't even follow me. Most of the people who comment don't follow me. But it's the engagement, because I'm asking a question that almost entices people to go like, oh, I gotta share my opinion. Because I'm opening up the invitation for people to want to ask questions or want to share their opinion. Because people always like to share their opinion, right? They always like to, just throw it in there. And that's what I'm inviting, which is great. And of course I engage with these, comments like, hey, like, thanks for sharing. Or, like, some of them I'm not aware of. They might be brokerages in other countries. So I said, hey, let me look into that. And it's honestly just surprising. I did not expect that much impression. Now, it's pretty cool to see that, but it's kind of like, okay, once that slows down, it's off to the next post. You got to start, posting things that actually hold value to people. And sometimes things are right in front of you that you might not think will get a lot of engagement, and it might just be something that you're asking maybe just in reference for yourself. One of my other tweets was, I'm looking to invest into a watch because I like watches. I think they're classy. Not an Apple Watch or a Fitbit guy, but looking to invest into a watch. Budget of no more than 1,000. Recommendations are welcome. That got 11 comments, 17 likes, over 1,000 impressions. Like I said, that's over, I want to say 7.5 times, impressions, the amount of followers I have. Now, obviously, likes are not cash, impressions are not cash, comments are not cash, but the impressions are valuable because it shows that it's hitting the algorithm. It's actually being thrown in there to where it's going to give me some type of engagement in return. I've given and I'm getting. And I got a lot of great recommendations. I got a few people who even privately messaged me and said, hey, like, if you're looking for a recommendation, blah, blah, blah. I think I have the watch of choice that I'm going to end up going with. It's like in the $500 or $600 range. And you could buy a lot of great watches for that price because, watches have such a wide span of, cost in that range. They could go from anywhere from like $20, $30 up to $1 million plus. So whatever your budget is, for the most part. My first watch, I think, was an Armatron. I bought it at, I think, Macy's. It's like $90. And then I broke it somehow. Pin fell out. But for the most part, looking at the algorithm, if it gets over 1,000 impressions, I'm doing something right. And of course, it started to slow down a little bit. So that's pretty cool. But aside from that, what's more important is that, the algorithm is something that is going to help your page expand. It's going to help it grow. It's going to help you be able to connect with more like-minded individuals. And I've had the pleasure of connecting with very like-minded who have very similar interests to me, who are more than, willing to listen to me and share ideas, bounce ideas, and productivity. I did two podcasts last week with two very fine gentlemen, and they have a decent following on Twitter, and their podcasts and whatnot. And I was honored to be a guest on their show. And we may not have like the largest following like Mr. Andrew Huberman, Mr. Joe Rogan, but it's just like within our own community where we favor, how valuable it is to bring our own community into that circle and go, hey guys, like we all support each other in our podcast, that they started from scratch and now they have X amount of viewers or, an audience listening and supporting them. And that's where we all start out. Another thing I want to go into is the noise. And I'm not talking quite literally, talking about the negatives of the noise. Now, there are so many different types of, noises here that could distract you from everyday life. And this is going from pretty much the social media aspect to, like noise slash productivity, which I really want to talk about. When I go on Twitter and I'm typing a lot and blah, 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 sometimes I do get constructive criticism, this and that. Obviously, you learn not to take it to heart. You learn to block out the noise. People are there just to write what they want. And people are there to also write hateful things. And I'm not saying my feelings are hurt. I could really care less. But it's just another way of you learning that you have to block out the noise, whether it's on social media, whether it's criticism. Another thing, too, is that you can't let it affect you outside of the phone. When you're at work, I see a lot of noise at work where people, talk about small things like rumors or this and that, and they try to get under your skin by doing things, maybe psychological on that scale, or something that really gets under your skin from the way they say something to you. And by no means is this really connected to the algorithm, but something I really want to point out is that I've seen this a lot lately with people on Twitter. And they tell me like, hey, like there's like some people on Twitter who write the cringiest of stuff, right? They write things that make no sense. They clickbait. Obviously, I would not throw these people's handles or usernames out there because it doesn't serve a purpose to. They're entitled to what they want to talk about. Of course, it's not factual, but they talk about things like, oh, leveraging debt is bad for you, this and that. Of course, I won't throw names, but I just think it's very interesting because people hate on these, Twitter users, but yet these Twitter users are getting like tens and thousands of impressions on their posts. So they're using basically like hate and enticement to increase their impressions and their following. And of course, that's going to backfire because you're going to have people who don't really understand what they're doing or why they're following you, but they're going to follow you, and you might have a decent following because of that. But your following maybe not is going to be the smartest of the bunch. So I'd rather have, a less following, people who understand where I'm coming from, what they're saying, what they're trying to convey to me, and not what we call like acquiesce to the crowd, where, you might have an opinion, but if the majority thinks of one thing, you're basically going to go against your own personal opinion and agree with the crowd because you might have a fear of being judged by the majority. So I have no problem not acquiescing with the crowd and going my own separate path, And some of the most successful people that I follow on Twitter who have a very good following on Twitter are people who decided I need to go down my own path. I can't just follow other people, regurgitate what they're saying, and just spit it out again every day, every day, every day. It just doesn't stop. And then all of a sudden they hit a wall where they can't grow anymore. Their page really isn't getting too many impressions, but they're recycling posts. And I've seen this a lot where Twitter users will like literally like copy a post and they'll repaste it from like 6 months prior. And people go, wow, that's amazing. Lots of engagement there, 10,000 impressions. But in reality, they haven't created anything new. There's no new value there. They're just regurgitating. They're reiterating. If you were to tell me, reiterate, what you had last night for dinner, I go, I don't want to eat lasagna again. I want to eat something new. That is creativity at its finest point. You had lasagna yesterday. Try something new today. Like maybe I'm going to make seafood, citrus salad with like quinoa. I don't know. I'm just throwing random stuff out there. And that does sound fairly good because it's something creative and it's something new. But if you said, oh, let's have lasagna again, it's not going to work. I mean, it would if you're starving, but for the most part, it's not going to work because it's not creative. You're just reiterating what you had yesterday. be creative, jump outside the box, think outside the box. And that's all a part of, being productive, which is my last point. Um, if you're on Twitter and you're just reiterating a lot of material, it's not healthy, And I know even I could be a hypocrite because some of the things that I say could be taken as reiterated, but maybe like reworded differently because under like one umbrella of like motivation or wisdom, it could all be tied into like that same thing of like when you're talking about being unique. I could give you a lot of things that I could be a hypocrite about, you know? Like in terms of like being unique and being like disciplined and, in your own mind, following your own path. If I were to say, like I said in my prior Twitter post, surround yourself with those who you can grow with, birds of the same flock. I'm not saying you're unique, but you're surrounding yourself with people, like-minded individuals who want you to walk down a good path to grow. But then maybe a post prior, which I did say was like average is not an option, meaning you're supposed to be unique. You're not supposed to be average and stand out, with everyone else. So technically, those are kind of similar in the same way, but I'm not regurgitating. I'm not copying the same post and repasting it. I'm just rewording it. And a lot of people might take that as, reiteration, regurgitation. I simply think about it as creative. You're taking new words and you're letting the algorithm basically sort it out and say, you know what, I like this. We're going to throw this in the algorithm. We're not going to give you too much impression, but we're going to show everyone that you were able to reach some type of, impressional value that let an imprint on people. And if people leave comments, I know I did something right. Because for someone to go out of their way to type a comment, sometimes it doesn't take a lot. Sometimes it takes a lot. It's like pulling teeth. But at the end of the day, I think what really matters is when we tie like all these three ideas together, which is what I really wanted to get at, if you haven't noticed, these three things tie together. To get into the algorithm, you have to have qualities of having, some type of productive page on Twitter, right? You have to be posting some type of creative material, content. That's not really regurgitation or reiteration. I mean, there are pages out there who are doing well doing that, but for the most part, it doesn't last forever. And then second, to get into that level of high algorithm reach, you have to block out the noise. Of course, if you're copying other people's posts, reiterating, whatever they're saying, you're listening to that noise and you're not really using, the noise inside your own mind to create something creative to hit that algorithm. Now, these posts that I write, I basically think about them myself. I don't really copy and paste them because I like to talk about my own journey. I like to talk about how I'm growing as a person, whether it's hunting, conservation, growing as a person, mental, physical, work related. That's all stuff that's unique to me. No one else can really copy that. But if I'm writing, average is not an option, anyone can say that. But if I'm saying like, here's, a little bit about myself, which is something I actually wanted to share. And a couple people messaged me about this privately, which I think is interesting because a lot of people have fear of like messaging other people or putting their comment out there like for the public. So they message people. And I said just a little about myself. I'll give you an example. I said age 25, my work. I work in national freight and logistics / sales. I have a degree in business, bachelor's of science. My birth month is February. My top three favorite stocks are Apple, Nvidia, and Tesla. Favorite food, pastrami sandwich. Favorite song, whatever it takes. Hobbies, cigars, hiking, reading, learning Italian and German language. Favorite country I visited, Japan. And then my favorite activity, hunting and conservation. And I said, send me a DM. I'd like to get you more. Sorry, I'd like to know you more. And I've had a few people message me and say, oh, like, blah, blah, I've done this, I studied this, I work in this industry. I was like, oh, wow, that's pretty cool. Because I'm willing to share a little bit about myself. People want to share something about themselves in return. So you see that, like, you give and you get in return. There's a law out there some philosopher came up with that basically, portrays to what I just talked about, where you have to give in order to get. And that's the only way that you could really get into the algorithm. You have to share a little bit about yourself without being too much of an open book. Like I tell people a lot of times, I don't care about my net worth because I don't believe it defines who you are as a person. Your character, your personality, that determines who you are as a person. Money is just a byproduct of all that. Especially if your money was inherited, you didn't work for it. So pretty much on that note, you have to, I'm blanking out. If you didn't work for it, basically, how do you have that much personality to brag, about something that was inherited if you didn't work for it? There's no story behind it other than like, oh, I inherited it. That's it. But if you go, I worked my way up to $1 million because I worked hard, I earned bonuses, I reinvested all my stocks into like, my money into high paying stocks and dividends. A couple of stocks did extremely well. They appreciated over time or grew, whatever you want to call it. And then I took that money, I reinvested into real estate. That real estate, appreciated, grew, and then I reinvested that, whatever, I rented it out. Now I'm worth like $1 million. That's a whole story. And you could talk about that for hours. But yeah, a lot of people don't know how to expand on that and how to share that. So once you figure out how to share all of that, then it starts to tie in together and then it becomes very simple. So for the most part, I hope this podcast really did give you a little bit of insight on how to, tie in algorithm, noise, and productivity, because these are three key important parts that I realized in just the last 2 to 3 months that are highly crucial, and basically how to get you out there in the algorithm. And it starts by giving, which I found very hard to do in the beginning. But once you get that ball rolling, you realize it's very easy to give and you feel very good about yourself. When you make someone else feel good, you give them that good emotion, they will remember that for the rest of their life. Whereas if you say something to them and it's just out of context, they may not remember it, or if it's in writing. But for the most part, if you support someone or you say something positive, then they will most likely respond with positivity. They'll help you grow. They'll be more than likely to listen to you if you ask questions, if you're willing to learn, and then you both go from there. And I've networked with a lot of people on Twitter in the last couple of months just because I've given out a lot of my attention to people and I've gotten a lot in return. I bounced off a lot of ideas. I've been extremely productive with a fair amount of, Twitter users on here. And all of a sudden, the algorithm, everything just starts to tie into each other, which I had a hard time doing with the first, couple months of having an account because you don't know where to start. That's everybody when they first start. But for the most part, I hope you guys took some type of value out of this podcast because, these three things are very crucial to growing an account, not just Twitter, but just in general. And, algorithm doesn't have to relate just to social media. It's about, maybe reaching that algorithm in life, which I feel like isn't talked about a whole lot, which I think that could be a whole different podcast. But I'll keep it short and sweet for now. Other than that, hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. Hope you guys took some form of value. And as always, stay tuned for the next podcast.